That's right, today we're talking about the Toxic Avenger, the movie that put Troma Films on the map. So much so that 36 years later, he's still their mascot. He was also the first superhero from New Jersey, but not the last. Toxic Avenger was a huge hit, and why wouldn't it be? It has everything you could want in a movie. Romance.
Boss says if he doesn't want to cooperate, we should make love to him.
Violence. Suspense.
Who's there? Who is that?
Gratuitous violence. Comedy.
Don't trip over the step, Malvin.
What?
And yes, even violence against animals.
Leroy, you wanna walk this damn dog? Yeah, sure, friend.
Toxie has it all, and that's why it went on to spawn 3 sequels. Number 2 and 3 are, pretty terrible, but don't take my word for it. This is the intro to part 4.
Melvin became the Toxic Avenger, the first superhero from New Jersey. Then 2 rotten sequels were made. Sorry about that.
Apparently they filmed them both together with the intention of it being a single movie, but they ended up stretching it out to 2. The results, aren't great. If you're really into Troma, they're probably worth checking out, preferably with some friends, preferably while drunk. Now, I haven't seen number 4, Citizen Toxie, yet, but the general consensus seems to be that it's the only decent sequel. From the clips I've seen, it looks like it's worth checking out for the sheer offensiveness, at the very least.
Listen, bitch. Just because I'm a turd, does that mean you have to treat me like that?
Then came the TV show and action figures. The 80s and 90s had a weird habit of turning ultra-violent movies into kid shows or toy lines, like with RoboCop, Starship Troopers, etc., etc. The general consensus on the show is that it was also pretty terrible, but admittedly the toys were pretty cool. If you're anything like me, you had friends with these toys growing up and had no idea they were from a movie or a TV show.
They're gross, but they're gonna clean up the world. Toxic Crusaders. Hideously deformed action figures and toxic waste, each sold separately from Playmate.
But 25 years later, I finally watched The Toxic Avenger, and it blew my mind. And for good reason. It's hard to get a low-budget movie right, but Toxie manages to hit all the marks. It's creative, funny, doesn't take itself too seriously, and most of the special effects are pretty damn good. The movie is super rough around the edges, like really rough. The editing is kinda terrible in places, like so terrible I probably could have done it, so that tells you a lot.
The boss is gonna have him by the balls. I don't think O'Clancy will take the money. Everyone says he's an honest cop.
But the movie has so much heart and general enthusiasm that the rough edges end up more endearing than anything else. That's the mark of a truly great B-movie and why he still has fans after not 1, but 2 atrocious sequels. Released in 1984 on an estimated budget of $475,000, The Toxic Avenger centers around Melvin, the most stereotypical 80s dork to ever be portrayed on film. Melvin works at the Tromaville Health Club, where all the town's criminals congregate. Literally all of them, from drug dealers to the comically corrupt mayor.
They were our 2 best producers.
Speaking of which, I almost forgot. The boys made their rounds last night, and here is the collection.
Melvin pisses off the local bully, a guy named Bozo, who subsequently plans to play a mean-spirited prank on Melvin. Now, to be fair to Bozo, Slug, Julie, and Wanda, Melvin is pretty annoying, so I probably would have been in on the prank.
Are you watching? I'm gonna kill it. I'm gonna kill it. I'm gonna kill it.
However, it all goes horribly wrong when Melvin jumps through a window and lands in toxic waste.
I think he's in trouble.
Julie, this guy, if he can't take a joke, he stinks.
He then lights on fire, and it's wonderful.
Melvin's on fire!
The toxic waste causes Melvin to transform into a giant hideous beast, and from this point on, the film is basically Death Wish with a mutant. Melvin starts hunting Tromaville's criminals, first by saving a police officer from a diverse bisexual street gang.
What are you and your boyfriends up to?
This scene is a great example of why this movie works. The whole thing is just absurd, but these actors are giving it their all. Now notice I didn't say it was great acting. There's not a lot of great acting in this movie, but there's a ton of enthusiasm. Everyone here is excited to be there, and it really makes the movie what it is. It's also revealed that Bozo and his friends are murdering people with his car for fun as well as sexual gratification. I guess we all have our kinks.
Faster and faster.
They just standing there. And yeah!
We hit him.
In one scene, they run over a young boy twice, and it's legitimately upsetting. I know I review pretty messed up movies here, but a few scenes in this are really jarring. I think it's because the movie's tone is so silly overall, and half the violence is just cartoonish. The violent scenes really stand out.
Oh, he's a cute little boy, isn't he?
How pretty laid, aren't you, honey?
Good lighting and special effects really come together to give this movie some punch. Like with this scene. It's just a melon filled with fake blood and a wig on it, but you light it right, you get the right leg wiggle, and it's pretty brutal. There really isn't much else to talk about regarding the plot. Melvin spends the rest of the film hunting down Bozo and his friends and killing any criminal he comes across, including crushing a drug dealer's skull with weights. Seems a bit excessive for just drug dealing, but who am I to judge? However, the town partly turns against him after he kills a midget by throwing her into an industrial washing machine.
What do you want? Stay away from me!
Seemingly for no reason. I looked it up online and apparently she's a slave trader or something, but there's nothing in my version showing this and it's never clarified later on. If you know what I'm missing, let me know in the comments. But Melvin doesn't just find justice, he also finds love. After he saves the life of a blind girl named Sarah, they start dating and quickly move in together. You see, she may be blind, but she can see the beauty inside that no one else can. That's another thing. After Melvin becomes a mutant, he becomes significantly less annoying than he was earlier in the film. Had he just acted normal in the beginning, this whole thing could have been avoided. Sarah, played by Andrea Miranda, does a great job. This is definitely not how blind people act, but her performance is sweet and endearing, and much better than the other actresses they bring in to play her role later. Plus, she's a good vehicle for some slapstick comedy.
Oops. Sorry.
Since there's not too much plot to talk about, I'm going to go over some Toxic Avenger fun facts. The role of Melvin was actually played by 3 different people. Mark Torgl plays Melvin, Mitch Cohen plays the Toxic Avenger, and in a very odd directorial choice, Kenneth Kessler plays the voice of the Toxic Avenger for about half the movie. I know, it's kinda weird. So for half the movie, Toxie doesn't show his face, leading up to a dramatic reveal later on, so naturally they dub over his voice. Poorly.
Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I don't know what came over me.
Another one of the endearing aspects of this movie. However, once Toxie is revealed, instead of just continuing to use the same voice actor and just dubbing it, they switch to the actual actor's voice.
I'm gonna teach you a lesson you'll never forget!
Like, if you were having trouble getting the dubbing to line up, why not just use the actor's voice throughout the whole film? There's probably a good answer for this, I just don't have it. Another fun fact is the name Toxic Avenger doesn't actually appear in the film except for a quick voiceover before the ending credits. In the film, they refer to him as the Monster Hero. They didn't come up with the name until after they were already done filming, and thank God they did. Monster Hero is a terrible name for a movie. Sounds like the name of a pretentious indie band. The original working title of the movie was Health Club, another terrible name that played into the trope of horror movies set in health clubs in the 80s. Speaking of tropes, the biggest one that this movie played into was the environmentalism trope from the 80s and 90s. So many movies and TV shows around this time really played into the fears of acid rain, toxic and nuclear waste, often with antagonists that seem to want to pollute the earth, basically for the fun of it.
Meltdown. Oh, Smithers, I guess there's nothing left to do but kiss my sorry ass goodbye.
May I, sir?
And possibly for financial gain, but the pollution was the most important part. Us 90s kids learned about saving the environment from shows like Captain Planet. We learned that nuclear power was bad, and we could save the world by recycling our plastic. Then it turns out nuclear power is actually pretty safe and pretty handy in regards to climate change, and all that plastic we were recycling was just shipped to Southeast Asia and put into a landfill. So congratulations, entertainment industry. You emotionally manipulated a bunch of hopeful children. I hope you're proud of yourself. It's also worth taking some time to talk about Troma itself. In the 70s, Lloyd Kaufman and Michael Herz created Troma Films and originally did a lot of work creating raunchy teen sex comedies. Probably one of my least favorite genres. However, in the 80s, When they made the Toxic Avenger, they really switched gears and started producing films more in line with exploitation films, and that's when they really hit their stride. But they didn't just make movies. They were also instrumental in helping many filmmakers get their start. Kaufman even wrote a book about his experience with Toxie with co-author James Gunn. He also wrote several other books about how to get started in the film industry. Not only that, they also started to run their own film festival, Troma Dance, which ran concurrently with Sundance. There, independent filmmakers were given a chance to show their skills, and if their product was good, they could even land distribution with Troma. This was actually the first big break for Trey Parker and Matt Stone, when Troma took on distribution rights for their film Cannibal the Musical, a film they made in college. I'm not a big fan of musicals in any way, really, but this film is pretty enjoyable, and it definitely shows these two had talent. About a year later, South Park came out, and I bet many distributors were kicking themselves for not picking up the movie when they could.
Won't you come to the hanging with me? Hang the bastard, hang him well. Send his sorry soul to hell, where his neck bone snaps will go. Then the cannibal won't be killing anymore.
The bar for getting into the film industry is super high, so I have tons of respect for Kaufman and Hers for doing what they can to lower that bar. I have a lot of respect for anyone who sees a problem and uses the resources they have at hand to address it. Troma also used to have a YouTube channel where you could watch for free or rent about 100 of their titles, but YouTube removed it this year for community guideline violations. So, fuck you, YouTube. But YouTube shenanigans aside, Troma has been contributing to independent film for 4 decades, and I hope the company keeps going for another 4.
Powers combined, I am Captain Planet! Captain Planet, he's our hero, gonna take pollution down to 0. He's our powers magnified, and he's fighting on the planet side. Captain Planet, he's our hero, gonna take pollution down to 0. Gonna help him put asunder bad guys who like to loot.
If you want to shoot my son, you'll have to shoot me first.
Well, that's my review, and I really hope you check this fun movie out. What do you think of Troma? Would you like me to review more Troma films? Let me know in the comments, and tune in next time when I review my local McDonald's restroom. Spoiler alert, I am loving it.
What a piece of junk!